Okay, great. So we should have just heard from a message from the foundation, so thank you for that. I'm choosing to do a screencast tonight because I want to make sure that I'm including all the super important information in a timely manner so that we can have time for questions at the end, and then as well as just like some mingle time because I think one of the great things about back to school night is taking the time to get to know one another a little bit more. So this is the general organization for what we're going to do and talk about tonight. Um, First is my teaching philosophy and background. Then I'm going to get into talking about a lot of the social emotional learning programs, which is SEL, and the character enrichment that we do here at Bullis, as well as the super exciting classroom policies and procedures. I have put in some academic content things that I think might be a little bit more engaging. I really wanted to give you guys a sense of what I'm asking your students to do every day in class, so that you're more aware of the learning that's happening. And then I'm going to go over some assessment routines and things that you can expect at Bullis because we do things a little bit differently here. Um, and then we're going to go over some field trips and things like that, and then have time for questions at the end. Okay, great. So, my teaching philosophy, I first wanted to show you just a little snapshot of some of my experiences. I've been working within education for over 10 years. I've had a variety of different roles. I've worked as a preschool teacher, mostly around early reading intervention and strategies. So that was an exciting time. I also ran a program it was an SEL program, a social emotional learning program designed for at-risk youth who are high school students, and the goal of that program was to get them college bound. I've taught throughout California and even in the rural South. There's some stories there. So if you ever want to hear about that, I'm happy to share. Um, and then some of my other experiences starting a learning lab for high school students at a great charter school in San Francisco. This was for students with special needs. And then also, I was trained as a behavior therapist through San Francisco Unified, working with students in their homes who are nonverbal. So that's some of my background. I think it's important to note. But when it comes to the philosophy that I have for teaching, I really think that it's about this balance between the art and the science of teaching. E- each are equally important. The science for me is about constantly challenging myself and my practice to stay up to date and to make sure that I am challenging students in everything that I do. And that means usually making sure that what I'm asking them to do is sound in terms of the research and the data. But that's the science stuff. That's the stuff that you can learn in a program. That's the stuff that I have learned throughout all of my experiences and that I apply every day in the classroom. The part that is equally as important is the art of teaching, and that is the love that you put into what you do every day. That's the bond that you create with your students, and that is equally as important. So for me, it's about finding that balance. And it's really what grounds my practice. When I think about what I want students to, the portrait of a Miss Trevor graduate, I really would love my students um, to lead this classroom with deeper thinking skills. I want them to be better listeners and more confident speakers and learners and human beings with compassion and empathy, and who have the confidence in themselves to take on risks and take on challenging learning tasks because life is all about that confidence and being able to tackle difficult things as they arise. So that's my portrait of a graduate. I could say a lot more. I think throughout the year, things will become clear with my kind of overall goals for the students as well. Um, so, our social emotional learning and character enrichment, it's a mouthful, here at Bullis. We do so many things, which is part of the reason why I was drawn to teaching at this school years ago. Um, and I think it's really at the heart of a lot of what we do. So, this is the definition of social emotional learning in terms of the science of education, right? So, you guys can just check that out and read it for a moment. Positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So, in a nutshell, it's all of these things. understanding others, having empathy, showing compassion, encouraging a dialogue when there's an issue, creating awareness, self-empathy, which I like the idea of, being kind to yourself. I think some of our students here can get really down on themselves, and so that's another big piece of what we do here. So these are some of the things that I do in my class. Again, it's kind of that art of teaching where it's the way that you create your learning environment. It's the way that you speak to kids. It's how you interact with students in the community that may not even be in the class. It's the way that you encourage students to communicate with others as well. But these are some of the things that I do. One of the big things is how I greet the kids in the morning. I know it sounds or may seem kind of small, and you guys might not even see it because we're at room 9 now, but um, I greet each kid in the morning with a high five or a fist pump or sometimes even a hug. And it's a great way to connect with them first thing, to get on the same page with them about obviously I can see how they're feeling, if they've had a good morning, if they're tired, if their hair is a mess, if they're, they have something to tell me about, their sister who bothered them in the car ride over. It's just that couple of seconds where I can check in with each kid first thing in the morning. Other big thing, school-wide, fifth grade buddies. So if the fifth graders become buddies for kindergartners. So each fifth grade student at South Campus will have a kindergarten buddy or potentially two, because there's actually 3 kindergarten classes and only 2 fifth grade classes. So the logistics there get a little confusing. But they'll get a buddy, and I have seen the fifth graders really take these kindergarten buddies under their wing. They become role models. They become so much more confident in their own abilities. The kindergartners look up to these kids like nothing I've ever seen. I have students who have told me that they continue to write letters to their buddies that they've had in the past. That when they see their buddy out, downtown or at a restaurant, they get super excited. So it's just a great time to build that leadership in for them, and they love it. Um, Spoke a little bit about the learning environment. Morning message is something that I do. You can kind of see it propped up in the corner. I'll point to it now. Here I write, I give them prompts. It's also a time to practice writing, so it's a little bit embedded, but really it's about getting to the heart um, of building the community. So giving questions like, what did you do over the weekend? Or, do you have any siblings? And what's your favorite color and why? And, throughout the year, they get a little bit more and more personal, but they also can sometimes be silly things. So we just enjoy like a silly moment in the morning. This is the first thing they do when they come in. They come in after that high five, they sit down, they read what's on the morning message, they respond to it in their morning message notebooks. We share out, and then we read the agenda. We read the agenda together as a class, and I give them time to ask me questions about what's going on that day. I found that it's really important for students to be able to ask their questions about the day first thing. This creates the routine, this creates security. So I definitely create the time for them to ask me any of the questions that they may have. Some of the other main pieces, besides the group worthy tasks, just making sure that you're actually asking them to work together and around things that are challenging, group worthy tasks, so that they can practice this learning. We do class meetings every week. We're also starting something called restorative circles this year, and this is something that all of Bolus is starting to try out. But there are ways to reconnect the community after something has happened that might have made it feel not so safe. So sometimes that could be somebody yelling at each other, and the next couple of days we bring ourselves together to kind of talk about it and share and make it right with the whole community again. So this is a practice that's proven really effective in creating safe classrooms and in creating transformative education, really. They're one and the same in a lot of ways, but yeah, so there's that. And then one of the things I'm sure you've heard a lot about is Fun Friday. So one of the main things with students of all ages is positive reinforcement. I am a firm believer in it. Whenever there's a moment to either discipline or try to reinforce or redirect, I always go for the latter, redirecting and trying to find the positive in each situation. When you tell a student no, or you're wrong, or any of those things. Their brains just shut down. They're not processing anymore. So really, I'm all about trying to create fun and reward good behavior, and honestly try to kind of ignore and redirect the bad. So, Fun Friday ends up being about 30 to 40 minutes at the end of the day on Friday where they can go on the computers, they can play with Play Doh, they can hang out with their friends, they can watch school appropriate like videos that I have to approve beforehand. But so, all of this, I could talk about this for days. I'm also putting in some mindfulness lessons with breathing and stress relief and all of that. So, the only other thing I wanted to put on your radar is fifth grade does this thing called the Amazing Character Race. It's modeled after a show that I've actually never seen. This is something Miss Fernandez put together where all the students will run throughout the school solving kind of um, fake little faux simulated emotional problems. They give advice to each other. They get all these beads, and then at the end, they each have this bracelet that shows that they've mastered all these tasks in being kind and being an active listener and all of those things. So I'm going to move on from here. Um, because we do have a solid amount of new parents and families in the room, I just wanted to briefly go over what FLGs are at a glance. So, FLGs stand for Focused Learning Goals. When you hear about Bullis, one of the first things you probably hear about is the individualized learning. And so our FLG process is that in a nutshell. It is the way that we are able to individualize educational goals for every student and then articulate those goals with you guys in a systematic way. So essentially, what happens is we do a bunch of beginning of the year testing. I'll get into that a little bit more later. We use benchmarks, we use state adaptive tests like NWEA. Um, and we do all of these testing so that we can, as a diagnostic, as an understanding of their strengths and their areas for improvement. After that, we look alongside fifth grade year long standards and we figure out what would be good year long goals for your students to have. Sometimes these are stretch goals, sometimes these are goals that um, they should be stretch goals, and sometimes these are goals that students can articulate as something that they want to improve on. So I just wanted to be clear that it's not me telling them this is your goal. It is a dialogue that I have with the student. We look through data together. Um, I help them process it. I help them understand the important pieces. I definitely highlight the positives. And we think about an area that we'd want to improve on. And we set 6 realistic goals. Um, the goals are in the content areas. So there's a math goal, reading, writing. Then there's a personal goal where they can write a goal and anything that they like to do in their time outside of school. If they're a gymnast, they might have a gymnastics goal. If they love baking, it might be a baking goal. If they want to be the next crazy coder guy, they can set a coding goal as well. I encourage all the different personal goals, and I love that they're able to share it at their school too, in their school lives. And then the last one, sorry, is a behavior goal. Oh, nope, that's not the last one. That's 5. That's behavior goal. And then the 6th one is content. So, content is kind of like a catch all. It can either be like a science goal or a social studies goal, or it could even be like a specialist goal. So, they could have a goal in art or PE or music. It's sort of also like whatever the kid is interested in and wants. Um, so, that's FLGs at a glance. Honestly, our system for parent teacher conferences here at Bullis is they're called FLG conferences. So these will be at those conferences. A lot more will be communicated to you about your student um, specific learning goals, and it will again be a dialogue between you and I and the student. So everyone has to agree that these are good goals, kind of approve them, and then we get into posting those grades on Fresh Grade. So also, side note, this when you have pieces of tests or essays or graded work that has this stamp on it, that means your student knows that they can take a picture of it and upload it to their Fresh Grade as evidence. That's just a whole nother thing. Again, that we'll get more into during the FLG conferences. But the one thing I did want to show was this is a hypothetical fresh grade profile. So really the thing that I can compare it to is Facebook. So you'll have like a profile picture and it's private. It's just able to be viewed from just it's just able to be viewed by you, me, and the student. Um, and then here you'll see like it'll say math and it'll have the math goal. This student will get an 80% on the numbers based 10 section of the end of the year math benchmark. Something kind of sounding like that. And then there'll be evidence of this student working towards it. So it's either schoolwork or classwork, and usually there's a picture. Sometimes we even have videos. If they have a listening and speaking goal, it's important to be able to see them listening and speaking, so you'd see that. So this is just what it looks like. Um, and it's very instinctive. It's very intuitive. I think you guys would be able to figure it out pretty quick. But just putting that out there. Classroom policies and procedures, the fun stuff. So this is everything at a glance again. So this is my email, ltrevor@Bullis Charter School, class website, which I hope all of you have been able to access already. I think most of you have for sure because I've gotten, I think, everyone's parent surveys, which were great. They told me a lot about your students. Thank you so much for filling those out. I'm also by phone, but honestly, these days email is so much faster. But always open for a phone call too. We can set that up. So every 2 weeks, I actually work with the students to write a class newsletter, and I send those out in our email. So I haven't done one of those yet. I'm sure this week we're due. It's about time. Now that we've gotten our newsletter team up and running, I promise to send one out Thursday. And then also, I think you guys have noticed that Thursday is kind of a big day. So that's the day that you'll get a lot of correspondence. Newsletters twice a month, every 2 weeks. And then Thursday folders will come home. This is every week. So maybe there's homework in there or tests, or sometimes I write just little post-its, shout outs about how proud I am of a particular student. And I want you guys to know that. And also sometimes it's important to know too that there's not too much that comes home in Thursday folders. Sometimes we haven't had a big test and it's been kind of a different week. So I just want to say that up front as well. And then also in Thursday folders, we're responsible for making sure that you have anything school-wide. So any school-wide handouts like, you've seen the picture day handouts that came home last week. So things like that. I'm always available. If there's any questions about anything, I want to be your main point person. So if you have a question about anything, come to me and I can point you in the right direction. And I also really just want to be in the loop with what's going on. So if it's a specialist, if it's co-curricular, if it's a trip to DC, all of that, I want to be aware of what's going on. So please communicate openly with me. There's some little rule of thumbs. Scheduling a meeting, just email. We'll set up a time. Expected response time is a day. Usually I try to be pretty on top of emails. So that's communication. This is our class website. There's these links up here. So every day, me and the students at the end of the day, it's called end of day routine. It's on the agenda at 3:00 every day. I'll click on homework and assignments and I edit it in front of them and we go over what the homework is. So every day this should be up to date. And when there's ever any questions, usually resources is the link. Field trips, I know we have a lot of questions about. This is really the place to go if you have questions about things that are due or field trips or links that, Ms. Trevor sent a couple weeks ago, but where's that link now? This is it. Also, this presentation is going to be left up on resources for the rest of the year. So if there's something you forget about the way that we do things or who to contact about what, that'll be up here. Another reason why I wanted to make this a screencast video. So this is kind of just a shout out. They're actually not called room parents anymore. We're changing them to being called classroom ambassadors, a little bit more official. And the role of this class parent is to support the teacher, act as a liaison. So mostly that means there are things communicated to the classroom ambassador that are not directly communicated to the teacher. and put together into, I think, like a PDF, and then that classroom ambassador blasts that out to the families on like a Sunday. Has traditionally been the day that they do it. So they're kind of getting class, like Miss Trevor, class specific information, but also school-wide information. Um, and then honestly, in fifth grade, the main role that I see and that I use the classroom ambassadors for is in fifth grade, we try to let them, within reason, plan their own um, their own class parties. So I guess the first one would be Halloween coming up. So we're gonna have a class conversation and class vote about the things that we'd want to do, whether we want to watch a movie, we want to do some crafts, all of that, and then I communicate with the room parent what the students have asked for and what we've agreed upon. And then the room parent delegates jobs to the volunteers, the parent volunteers. I'm sorry, the classroom ambassador, and gets kind of busy planning the party. So that's one of the main roles that we use the classroom ambassadors for in fifth grade. Besides this general correspondence between administration, and the rest of the parents in the class. So we don't currently have somebody in my class who's volunteered for this wonderful role. So I'm kind of just leaving a shout out for that here. Please let me know if you're interested. I will be eternally grateful, and I promise I won't be a pest. Just very grateful for anyone who can take the time to volunteer in this way to support the students. I'm going to ignore the phone ringing because or else I'm going to have to start all over. But this is our schedule. So again, like I said, morning message. We try to do math right after. The gray is specialists. Writer's workshop following math typically. Reading following writing. And then if you can see at the end of the day, I usually try to do science and social studies. And then also make sure that we're building in time for community meetings. Building time for reflections. So this Thursday folder's FLG focus is a time to build in reflection, and that's when students are looking at things that we've stamped as evidence and uploading them to Fresh Grade and writing emails to you guys saying, look at all the awesome stuff that I've been doing, come check it out on Fresh Grade. What else did I want to point out here? The only other thing I really wanted to point out was co-curriculars. So again, for those of you who are new, co-curriculars are part of the school day. So as you can see, they take place Wednesdays at South Campus after lunch from 1:20 to 3 o'clock. Students can elect 2 different co-curriculars to attend, and they're awesome. They are basically a more engaging, if you will, or a different approach to teaching the content standards. So they are aligned with the Common Core, and they're really great. If there's any questions about how to sign up for those, which ones you recommend, I'm here to help. I really suggest, though, letting your student kind of show you the way with that. Extracurriculars, on the other hand, are at the end of the day, a couple days a week. We do them on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Wednesdays we have an all-staff meeting, so we can't offer them, and Fridays we also don't offer them so that teachers can use that time as prep. That schedule. It's also on the class website. Also on the class website under schedule, just one more time. Yeah, so if your student is absent, you have to email me and as well attendance@bullischarterschool.com just to keep everybody in the loop. If students are late, you have to have them check in with the office to get a late slip. Book checkout is pretty simple. Students will just sign out a book from the library, bring it back within a couple days. I'm really pretty casual about it. I haven't had too many books go missing. And again, I mentioned end of the day, students will get together and edit the class website in real time so they know what to expect of themselves that week and that day. So academic content at a glance. Bottom line is we are a standards-based school. So we follow the California Common Core, both the national and the state Common Core, as a matter of fact. I get so many questions about what the Common Core is, what it means, all of that. So I've actually printed out some frequently asked questions, and I will direct you guys to those before you leave today. It's basically just a research-based, developmentally appropriate set of expectations across all the content areas for what students should be able to master. It also helps so that um, there's not overlap in education, overlap in teaching skills, and that there's a progression, right? So if teachers are teaching to the standards in kindergarten through 12th grade, there should be this consistency and this portrait of what somebody who graduates from a California public school should be able to do. So there's that, but then also we do at Bullis, we have next generation science standards. So these are new standards that have been rolled out in the last couple years. They're again aligned with Common Core science standards, but it's a kind of a different approach and add-ons. So the focus here is more on hands-on experiential learning. So if you look around the classroom, we have these big black and white kind of camouflage boxes. Those are full of different units of study for our science. So they're full of experiments waiting to happen. So it's very hands-on with a huge focus in STEAM. And STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The A recently being added, which I think is great. And then the other focus that we have is our history and social science framework for public schools. So it's important to note that the social studies standards have been the same their nationwide standards. They've been the same for 20 plus years. And there's been a lot of history that's happened in 20 years that are not covered by those standards. So one of the things that has happened recently is that California public schools have created a new framework. So the standards have stayed the same, but the way in which we teach them has changed. And there'll be a little bit more information about this in a moment. I'm going to move forward. This is kind of academic content in the homeroom classroom at a glance. We do readers workshop, writers workshop, which are models by a woman named Lucy Calkins, which is pretty widely used now, I think in the state of California. English language conventions and grammar. We use an online program called No Red Ink. Science, like I said, is those next generation science standards along with the supporting curriculum of FOSS, which are those big boxes. Social studies, we have the framework infusion. We also are a project-based learning school. More about that in a moment. And then listening and speaking, again, is one of the things that I push. So those are embedded throughout all that we do. So at a glance, like I've said, I'm trying to keep it all at a glance. I don't know if I'm doing such a good job, but at a glance, the flow of a reader's workshop lesson is that you introduce a new strategy in a mini lesson using a variety of strategies. Then the students practice that new strategy, new concept, new idea, etc. Then you have to take the scaffolds and the support away in some way. So maybe they're not in a small group anymore and they're practicing by themselves, or maybe the independent practice in this case is at a small group, but they're doing it more independently than they were in the guided practice. So you're slowly removing those supports. And then there's an extension. This is true in all lessons, not just in Reader's Workshop, but students should always understand why they're being asked to do something. And if they can't make a connection or think of a couple real-world applications or reflect on why it was important for their personal learning, then they shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. So I told them the first week of school that I promise I will not have them be doing busy work, just important work. So you'll actually see that in the class constitution that we made. No busy work, just important stuff. So these are two of the books that we read in Reader's Workshop. Blood on the River is a classic book that 5th grade students read about the founding of the Jamestown colony. It has, characters like John Smith and Pocahontas, and it's very well known. It's also really enforced throughout the DC trip. We go to museums and things, and museum curators say, "Oh, well, did you read Blood on the River?" So I think it very much aligns with our class curriculum. We do a lot around that at the beginning of the year. And then one of the other books that we read is The K by Theodore Taylor. This book was written in 1969. It's a little bit dated, I think, and it's also a little bit difficult for our students to understand the message of. So I'm thinking this year about rolling out something new. I think variety and change is always good. Um, I'm thinking about different books that might be more relevant to our students here in Los Altos and at Boas. So if you guys have any suggestions too, that'd be great. It's still a work in progress, but that'll be at the end of the year. So one of the great things that we do, I wanted to give you kind of a glimpse in to class time. This is one of the cool things we do in Readers Workshop. It doesn't really follow the model that I showed you, but it shows you an example of trying to keep things stimulating and fun, which is what it should be about. This is a book tasting, so these are all books about the American Revolution, and students come and they do a book tasting instead of like a wine tasting. They kind of read the back of each book. They think about which one they'd like to read the most, and then they get into groups based on their preferences, so their choices. These are called book clubs. This is a strategy for teaching that has proven really effective if students have the voice and choice over what they're learning and the direction that they take in their learning. So having them choose a book is huge. The buy-in is really great with this project. And then we do lit circles, literature circles. They read. We talk about why literature circles are important. So I always project the why for them as they're engaging in their lit circles. These were some of the whys that my students last year came up with. I think it's awesome. I remind them of their rules because I record them on the iPad so that I can refer back to what they've been talking about, because it's hard to monitor 5 or 6 different conversations at the same time in a real effective way. So I remind them of how to use the iPads to make sure their voices are being heard. I remind them of their rubric. They have to come prepared. They have to contribute, critical thinking, summarize. These are also listening and speaking standards, so they're aligned to that. Common Core. So for example, one of the new things they might have to do in this lit circle is ask really good questions. So there was one mini lesson that we talked about. We did some work around Bloom's taxonomy and trying to push ourselves from these kind of knowledge comprehension based questions to more of this analysis, synthesis, and even the evaluation. It's amazing what fifth graders can come up with. They astound me. They just need to know what a good question is, and then they're off to the races usually. So this has been a great lesson. And then they apply it in their lit circle. So this is kind of the flow. They would have a role. They do their awesome questions. They wrap up the conversation. This is the actual slides that I project. And then we do a reflection. So I have beach balls that are blown up and we throw them around in a whole class discussion, and whatever their hand lands on is the question they have to answer. So, or the thing that they have to do. So one of them would be give a kudos to somebody in your group, or what could you do differently next time when you disagree with somebody? Something like that. So it's, again, to encourage that personal reflection and that metacognition of learning. Writer's Workshop. So it's, again, pretty similar. The only difference with Writer's Workshop, which is a Culkins-based piece too, is that there's huge time for one-on-one conferences. This is a typo here. So really it's about kind of like flash drafting and then really getting students to understand that nothing's perfect that first time around and you have to go back and edit. So for me, I put a lot of my effort in teaching them how to brainstorm. I feel like starting writing is usually the hardest part for students. So I spend a lot of time brainstorming and then a lot of time revising. Drafting is usually short, and then it's just this circle of revising and brainstorming, all in the editing process, right? But really, writing is just about a dialogue that you have to have with a student. You have to ask them what they want, what they're trying to say, because sometimes it can get lost in translation when you're learning how to write. So they write creative writing, fictional pieces, personal narratives, fractured fairy tales, where they rewrite a fairy tale to make it more, to make it a message they want to send. We do informational writing, so this is like research papers, also a huge skill. And then opinion, where they articulate what they think about something in a respectful, research-based way. All of these writings, amazing. All of these writings, important. So this is an example of one of the brainstorming pages for fractured fairy tales. So just understand that when you look at a brainstorm that your student might bring home, each of these things that are on it have been a lesson. Each of these things have been taught. So when I throw them a brainstorm, I don't say, okay, brainstorm it out and write it up. There's been many lessons on each of these things. So when I say an idea to spice it up, they shouldn't say, I don't know what that is. Mom, I don't know what that is. Miss Trevor didn't teach me. Everything on here has been a mini lesson. 7 basic plots, all of these things. The fractured fairy tale unit is one of my favorite ones. I think the essential question for this is, what message do you want to tell future generations? And they pick a story that's been, a popular story like Hansel and Gretel, or any of the stories they grew up with too, the ones that are familiar to them. And they rewrite it. So, maybe Goldilocks doesn't, what happens with Goldilocks? She runs out of the house and the bears freak out because all their stuff's broken. Maybe something else happens that's more inclusive, and they sit down and they build her a chair that's perfect for her. And so the message being, they want to spread more inclusive attitudes and ideas. So this is the essence of this unit. It's a lot of fun, but I just wanted to show what brainstorming was and put it on your radar that these brainstorms show what has been taught in writing. English language conventions. So these are the lessons, the mini lessons that we have applied to different writing units. So we've noticed that when they're writing personal narratives, they're really needing to think about commas and embedding quotations, of course, among other things too, but we wanted to align these in some way that made sense for students. So this is kind of the structure for our language. And we use a program called No Red Ink. So No Red Ink is kind of cool because, again, it's like you do the mini lesson. So this mini lesson, for example, would be on fanboys, or full lesson. You teach it however you think is best for your students. And then they correct a sentence. And what's cool about the sentences that they correct are when they first create their No Red Ink private accounts, they get to select like 100 different things that they like, and they can input like their pets' names or their parents' names or their siblings' names or their best friends' names. And so these questions that are generated feel more like things they know about, and that they become kind of even sillier. So this is an example. After the barbecue, I stayed to clean the tables, but Jennifer Lawrence rushed home to pet her iguana. Kind of crazy. So they would have to decide for themselves if this is the right coordinating conjunction for this sentence. And then they would submit the answer. They would click it and it would change to a few other options like for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. That's the abbreviation for fanboys. Yeah. And then this would be the same kind of lesson. Another example. Donald Trump can hula hoop for 10 minutes without stopping, and I am jealous of his skills. So you would have to decide if and is the best coordinating conjunction as well here, and then submit your answer. And then when you get it wrong, they kind of reiterate to you and explain in a different way. Science. So these are our science units of study. We also have one PBL that's around our science standards that's coming up here shortly, actually. It's called Environmental Entrepreneurship. It is awesome. It is tied to ecosystems, interactions, energy, and dynamics. It's also tied to earth systems. It's about growing produce to feed people in need. So I will show you this at a glance. This got cut off, but I wanted to show you a little bit of the process of a PBL. So in the process of a PBL, you present students with a problem, and then they get busy solving it in whatever way that means. It should never look the same way twice. So the problem we present students with is there are people in our community that are going hungry, and how can we feed them? The essential question is, as entrepreneurs, what can we do to grow produce to feed people in need? That's the question. They come up with all the things that they need to know in order to answer it. So they don't know much at this point. And I apologize, I got caught off a little bit. So they brainstormed, made a need to know list. This is a student's presentation that they made a couple years ago. And then they researched different garden designs that can grow produce most effectively. So this group said, well, we think this vertical hanging garden would be the most cost efficient, That's the entrepreneur side, but it would also grow the most produce. So that's the the gardening side, which also they're able to use Walker Creek naturalists as experts to help them in the process, which is great. It's also interdisciplinary in that way. And then they plan a prototype. So they go to the maker space and they either design um, a prototype of something like this or whatever system it is that they've come up with so that they can have something to present when they do their Shark Tank pitches. So I don't know if any of you or all of you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the show Shark Tank. We watch Shark Tank, they watch kids doing pitches. And they put together a pitch to our administration about why they should finance their design to put up in our garden at BCS and grow produce. So they are there convincing our administration to pick their team to finance to feed people in need. So they are being, morally grounded entrepreneurs, and it's amazing to see. There's also some reflecting and some feedback in the process of a PBL, encouraging each other, giving each other feedback. That idea of multiple articulations, going back to the drawing boards, real life stuff. Sketching. I wish we had time to show you the video, but I just wanted to pop this in here because we don't open this up for parents to come to because it would make students super nervous. But what I do is I do a live stream and I share it out, and you guys just click on the link and you can see your kids up there doing their pitches, being funny, being goofy, trying to entertain administration to get theirs picked. So I just want to put that in there. Social studies. Because a good education can't be measured by a test score. So oftentimes social studies has been taught with memorize this date, memorize this person, where did this European explorer come from, where did he travel to, and there's very little why. So again, I try to bring everything back to the why, so I really push forward the framework. These are essentially this is the layout for the things responsible for being taught in 5th grade. So we're already kind of here. Which is great. So there's that. So part of the social studies framework is to have year-long essential and driving questions. So similar like you would have in a project-based learning experience, students are required to be thinking about something meaningful all year. So this is the one that we think about all year because again, our content is about the making of a new nation, right? So students are asked, what does it mean to be American? And any answer is acceptable. At the beginning of the year, we do flash drafts, and a lot of them say, I think being American means liking baseball or eating cheeseburgers or going to school. And some of them say, I think being American means also, maybe having immigrants in your family. I think being American means standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. So there are a million different ways to respond to this question, and I just want to iterate that there's not an answer I'm looking for. I think it's just something worthwhile to be thinking about, and that's the point of the question. Later on throughout the year, another example of a unit that we do that aligns to what it means to be American is we start looking at constitutional rights as set forth by the Bill of Rights. So the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of protest, freedom of expression, etc. We go all the way down the list. They're looking at the rights of, the death penalty rights, all the way down the list. I don't emphasize the right to bear arms as much. I just don't think it's appropriate at this age level. So there is some sensitivity there that I definitely take into consideration when setting this unit. But what constitutional right do you think is being shown in these photos? So we're showing photos. They're thinking about what constitutional rights these Americans or non-Americans are showing. Some famous different photographs throughout the ages. And honestly, I've seen kids get very, very interested in these things because they know that these are things that they hear their parents talking about. And so I think it's fair to provide them some context. And that's what it's called in the social studies framework. It's called a current context. So you are required as a teacher to draw connections for students to get them to think about how past things have influenced the way things are today. So there's that also. I also wanted to just throw out there that, I understand that studying the Constitution is sometimes tricky, but I also put in there, we study a lot about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was modeled after the Constitution, very similarly written. And it just talks about the rights of all humans in any place on earth, in any situation. And so I think it's a really good moment to talk about what we have in America, what we don't have in America, and what the shape of the world is. Again, students surprisingly know a lot more than I ever expect them to know about what's happening in places across the globe. So great time for that. So math, I know, is a big piece of our instructional day. We make sure to do math 4 to 5 times a day, whereas other content is sometimes less pushed in the school day. So this is at a glance. I just want to say that as a teacher, I think that the most important thing about math are the math practices. These math practices are persevering through math when it gets difficult, using the tools appropriately, um, constructing viable math arguments, one of the most important, attending to precision, noticing patterns. I posted all of the math practices on the math bulletin underneath, so you can see all those, but I explicitly make time for those in instruction. And I've seen that it really helps students redefine what it means to be good at math. So one of the ways that I do that is through math talks. These are essentially little Socratic seminars, but built around math. We do them at the end of a unit. They're differentiated, meaning the first problem is usually the easiest, with the easiest access in. And by easiest, I mean something that we've taught. So it should be an easy ask. They have to construct a viable math argument, use visual models, use a number model, number sentence, and then answer that why, right? That big why at the end. So they have to do that for problem 1. Problem 2, which kind of revamps up again, but this is something taught, so it shouldn't be too challenging because it's been taught explicitly. 3 will also be something taught, but a little bit more of an ask, maybe multiple steps. And then the last one isn't really something that we've taught explicitly, but that could be used to take your knowledge further. So that's how those are differentiated. And then they come to school and they have these arguments prepared, these viable math arguments prepared, and they discuss. And they use their visual models and their number models as proof. And sometimes they come to realize that the way they saw something maybe wasn't the most effective. And sometimes they learned, wow, I think that there's a different way of doing that. And there's also a lot of social emotional learning that goes into this as well. So that's one of the things that I love to do in math. I think this is just an example of the ways in which I make sure students are actively practicing these practices. I think it's really easy to just say as a teacher, oh, they're embedded. Yeah, they're always talking about their math knowledge. But to really structure the time and provide the time for them to do that within boundaries, I think is really powerful. And I've seen it really help all students. I think it really pushes students who struggle with math in the 5th grade level, and then also really pushes students who are advanced in math. So this is something that I'm really excited to start rolling out. The first math talk of this year will actually be Thursday or Friday, depending on what I can see the students need time-wise. So be on the radar for this. They should be working on this. They should be working on this in class and showing you it at home. But I really would like this to be more independent so that I can see what they're capable of, especially at the beginning of the year when we set FLGs. So project-based learning. This is this beautiful sketch for project-based learning at a glance. So we have 2 PBLs throughout the year. The first one's the environmental entrepreneurship that I spoke a bit about. The other one is American Revolution, PBL, not just PB. This is one that Bullis has been doing since I've been here for a long time. The essential question being, how can we design an engaging museum that connects current day America with the events of the American Revolution? So essentially with this, students design a museum to teach our community. So whether that be the Bullis community or the Los Altos community or whatever, to teach our community about why it's important that we know about the founding of this country. And then one of the new ones that I'm excited about this year is we are rolling out a digital citizenship PBL. So students are spending more and more time online. So we wanted to target some instruction around what the responsibility is of a digital citizen in this world. So the question being, what responsibility do we have as digital citizens, and how can we teach others? So the idea here being, we don't want you to just be able to answer that question. We want you to be able to teach others and spread the word. So one of the great things is we have some communications with the Los Altos town crier. So when we were doing this American Revolution PBL, part of it was that we wanted to connect our community to the events of the American Revolution. So we have a connection that the Los Altos town crier has come out here and interviewed students and written a report about what our students have done. And so that has been something that they've been so proud of. In years past. So we're going to hope to keep that going. Just putting a shout out to the public that um, that's something that we do, which is cool. Um, next one is digital citizenship. So this one, as it's kind of just now being rolled out, we're still thinking about it, and I can say that we're looking for experts. So part of the process of a PBL is that students are able to actively interview experts in the field. So when I mentioned before that, for the environmental entrepreneurship PBL, they're able to use their kind of cabin people or they're called naturalists. They're naturalists at Walker Creek as experts, because these are people who are experts in produce and in growing produce. It's also important that we try to find some experts for digital citizenship. Um, so here's my blast. We, as a fifth grade team, are looking for experts in news, media, and literacy. We're also looking for potentially psychologists or people who work with maybe children or adolescents who have been bullied. We're looking for people with backgrounds in copyright laws, whatever that may be, a lawyer, an editor. We're also looking for marketing people, people in cybersecurity. And if you think you have some expertise that could benefit this PBL, just let me know. The most important thing here is that we're doing this PBL in fifth grade, but they also circle back around to it in sixth grade. So they will be doing this again in sixth grade, hopefully with the same panel of experts that we put together, but they think about how they want to display themselves as online members of society. So it's a little bit different than what we have planned, but we would love to use your expertise. You'd be doing the school um, huge benefit. Listening and speaking, I talked a little bit about that. I just want to say that it is embedded, it is interdisciplinary, it's cross-cutting, and it's rigorous, and that's my goal. This is one of my big pushes as a teacher. So, as you guys know, we've had some field trip information things already. This year, as things have happened earlier than usual and faster, and so that's why there's been a little bit of back and forth kind of bumps we've needed to smooth out. So normally at this time is when I tell you guys about the information night for the field trips. We've already had that. So unfortunately, I couldn't answer too many of your questions before we got there. But DC is happening, more information to be determined. Walker Creek is happening very shortly, September 30th through October 3rd. Thank you so much to all of the cabin volunteers for making this happen, and those of you who volunteered but weren't able to actually come because we were filled. I really appreciate your volunteership too. Then we have two other field trips that we go to. We go to the Disney Family Museum and the Tech Museum and Chemistry Lab. We go to the Disney Family Museum in conjunction with our American Revolution PBL so that they can see an effective museum and think about techniques that are engaging to communities. We go to the Tech Museum and Chemistry Lab at the end of the year when we're studying chemistry. And that's just to get in a lab, with the cool stuff and actually be mixing and playing with things like that. So there's that. We do a little bit of that with the FOSS boxes, but it's different when you get to kind of go into a lab with scientists. So I have a few things I can say about specialists, but to be honest with you, I know mostly about all the things that I just said. And as you can tell, there's a lot to just juggle there. So I'll tell you as much as I know about these things and then direct you to the people who can tell you more. Spanish. We do Spanish as a class in 5th grade starting halfway through the year. So around Christmas, students will all start taking Spanish as an introductory course, because if they stay in our middle school program, they have to choose which language they would like to pursue further. So they can either choose Mandarin or Spanish. If they've been here since kindergarten, they've been taking Mandarin since kindergarten. Spanish is 1 year, half a year in 5th grade to expose them, to give them a chance to pursue either track. That's about all I can speak to with Spanish. They will receive a grade and it will be on report cards. Then Mandarin. Again, usually at this time, Mandarin hasn't been rolled out yet, but this year we're flying through things. Mandarin is actually voluntary. It does not happen during the school day. It happens before the school day from Monday through Thursday, Friday from 7:50 to 8:30 a.m. So these are the time frames that we do Mandarin. And it's 120 minutes a week. So again, it's voluntary. It is not required. I think signups have already happened. I'm going to quickly go through her slides so that you can see them. Our Mandarin teacher. So these are language standards that are again aligned with Common Core. The homework policy I've never seen to be too much of a problem. And by that I mean it's not a huge load of homework. It's something that's definitely doable alongside everything else. These are the learning outcomes. These are some of the projects. They have a PBL, a mini PBL that they do in Mandarin as well. I love that they use Google Maps for that. And then this is our Mandarin teacher, Miss Tang. So this is her email, South Campus. And then if there's any Mandarin questions, again, you should email her directly, but then just CC me so that I know what's going on with your kid all around. Music. We have a new music teacher this year named Mrs. Marriott. She will be providing department updates, hosting general music classes, activities. She's great. I've highlighted the South Winter Music Concert and provided some other dates, but honestly, more information will be shared about these things as they approach. As you can see, these are all in December. This one's at the end of the year, so I think we've got some time. No one needs to worry too much about those now. I just wanted to put them on your general calendars up front. This is a message from our new PE teacher named Portia Jenkins. She is teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students PE at both North and South campuses. She seems to be here, I think 3 days a week. It seems like she's here a bit more than she is at North. So she's definitely available for PE questions. And you can also email Bea Davis. I'll attach both of their emails. I forgot to do that before I post these. So you can email Portia Jenkins and Bea Davis about school-wide PE things. Putting that on there because Miss Davis is here 5 days a week, as opposed to Portia who's only here half the time. So assessments, just at a glance, I really do want to say that all of this will be gone over in grave detail during FLG conferences, so I don't kind of want to give you the same information twice. But at a glance, we use assessments as multi-tiered systems of support. So we do benchmarks at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year to track students' growth. Our school is not a school that prides itself on our school, I'll put it in the positive. Our school is a school that prides itself on emphasizing student growth above all else. So we emphasize with the students how much they have grown, not their mastery at the beginning of the year, not their mastery at the middle, and not their mastery at the end, but their growth. We also use a program called NWEA, which is a national adaptive test that places students against the grade level standards and tells us kind of their areas of improvement and their strengths. I think we use this as a way to reinforce that we're getting the same information in our benchmarks. And it's just another tier of support. So I have a handout for that as well, alongside the Common Core handout for you guys at the end of the day. But more about this at FLG conferences. I don't want to overwhelm you now. Report cards. All you need to know now is in 5th grade, students receive letter grades for each subject. The other thing that you can you should know off the bat as well is that students, at the beginning of the year, we have only taught a third of the content. So what you'll see most likely, what you will see at the beginning of the year is that we have marked only about a third of the standards across all the content, all the content areas. That's because we've only taught them for a third of the year. So we can't hold them responsible for mastery of all of the standards when we haven't even taught all of them yet. So in the middle of the year, you should see about 2/3, and by the end of the year, you should see that we've taught your students all the grade level standards, and that their end of the year grades show mastery of those those standards at that point, at the end of the year. So honestly, there's usually a lot of growth that happens. So just be on the lookout for that. I'm always available to talk about grades. Grades do not define a student. It shows you where they are in terms of mastery of the assessed standards each trimester. That's all it shows. More to that point, these are some bullet points that I think are important to think about when we talk to students about their growth, their grades, their achievement, etc. These are things that I see as very important. Making sure you're allowing them to advocate for themselves, embracing mistakes, not disciplining for being forgetful or for not improving as quickly as you would expect, not comparing to other students, other siblings, peers. Other ways you can support are by reading my newsletters and emails, and that supports just the home to school kind of connection pipeline. And then communicate with me. Open communication is key. I do want to know what's going on with your child. Anything that I need to know, anything that I should know, anything that you want me to know, I'm here to talk, to support each of those kids. Each child is unique and has unique needs, and I'm here to work with you guys. Logistics. Look for a link in an email from me, 4 p.m. on Friday. So you'll get a Thursday email and newsletter, but then on Friday you'll just get a link to something that looks like this. This is where you sign up for fall conferences. The dates are wrong. This is a screenshot from last year, I think. You'll sign up for your slot there. And then there's also links here at the bottom for if you want to chaperone a field trip, if you want to volunteer as a room parent, etc., etc. So that'll all be there. No worries, just 1 minute. So that'll all be there. That's going out 5 p.m. on Friday. So 5th graders also attend their meeting, so make sure that they're there. They are actually going to be leading it, hosting it for the most part. This is a huge thing. So when you get this link in your email, 4 p.m. on Friday, you should plan to be around so that you can try to get the slots that work best for you and your family for our conferences. And then also, if you want to have any of these roles in the classroom, they do fill up quickly. So be on the lookout for that. And that's all. So I said it was going to be short. I tried to make it as short as possible. I'm going to wrap it up. And if there's any questions that can benefit the whole group, we're going to do those now. And then outside of that, just hopefully we still have some time to mingle. So thank you so much, and talk soon.